Hello, welcome to Minding Your Wellbeing. This programme aims to encourage you to take a positive approach to caring for your mental health. It'll provide hints and tips and guidance to help you care for your mental health every day. My name is Teresa McElhinney. I'm a Senior Health Promotion Officer working in Health and Wellbeing in the HSE. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the programme and to talk about why positive mental health is so important to us. If we look at the definition of the World Health Organization, they would say it's a state of well-being that allows us to recognise and use the abilities that we have to deal with the stresses and the strains that life throws at us, and we all have them, and to contribute and be productive in our day-to-day lives. In fact, the phrase, "there's no health without mental health," shows how important our mental health is to our lives. There are so many benefits to having good mental health. We feel happier, we enjoy life more, and we look forward to the future. We feel more resilient and able to cope with the challenges that life can throw at us. And we want to build positive relationships and connect with other people. We want to be involved in our community and contribute. And one of the key benefits is it affects our overall well-being, including our physical health. We know that there's evidence that actually proves that our heart health and our brain function improves with good mental health, and we're likely to recover better from illnesses. So there's a lot of reasons why we should care for our mental health. So in recent years, we have an increased understanding and appreciation of the value of good mental health. We're aware that the levels of depression and anxiety are increasing. And because of COVID-19, we're experiencing new challenges perhaps we haven't done before. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the programme. It was developed by the National Mental Health and Wellbeing Programme. And we've been providing it on a face-to-face basis in a group situation for the last number of years. The programme itself is based on a lot of research and evidence around the area of wellbeing and positive psychology. And that would tell us about the benefit of doing what we can to flourish and thrive. The programme will encourage you to discover your strengths and to use them to deal with the challenges that you might face in the day-to-day way, and to take a positive approach to caring for your mental health so that you can enjoy life and look forward to the future. So we're pleased to bring you this online version of the programme. So it consists of 5 sessions, each lasting about 20 minutes. The greatest benefit would be to watch all of the sessions, but you might find that you're drawn particularly to some area that you want to know more about, and you might just watch those, and that's up to you. So our first session is practicing self-care. So we'll look at what self-care actually is and how we can build it into our day. And we'll help you create what we call your own self-care toolkit. The second session is understanding our thoughts. It will look at why our thoughts are important to our mental health and how we can actually make them work better for us to create positive mental health. The third session is exploring emotions. So we'll look at how our emotions impact on our mental health and how we can build positive emotions in our lives. So our fourth session will look at building positive relationships and why good relationships are so important to our mental health and well-being. Our fifth and final session will look at improving our resilience. We'll talk about the building blocks of resilience and how we can use our strength to support our mental well-being and to learn how to thrive and flourish in our everyday life. So let's get started. So in the session, we're going to look at what self-care actually is and what various things you can do to build self-care into your day. And also how you can actually make it a priority, because that can be a challenge for all of us. Let's look at a formal definition of self-care so that we know what we're talking about. That would be the activities and practices that we deliberately choose to do every day to support our health and well-being. And notice in the definition the word deliberately, because if we don't deliberately plan it and choose to do it, then it often doesn't happen. So really what self-care means about prioritising taking care of ourselves every day in different ways. And there's various activities that we can do that help our self-care. So why is self-care important? Well, for a start, it improves our overall health and well-being. And it also helps us feel better about ourselves. It improves our self-esteem, because if we feel good, then we'll feel better about ourselves. And one of the benefits of good self-care is that we're more likely then to be able to relax and sleep better as well, because we're caring for ourselves during the day. It also helps us to cope with life's challenges, because the better our self-care, the more resilient we are. So we can cope with the challenges that we're facing every day. So there are many benefits to good self-care. What are good self-care habits? There are many of them, and we know that people who have good mental health practice a lot of these habits every day. The first one is really about what we eat. So eating healthily is key to our good self-care. So that will be looking at our diet, our consumption of fruit and vegetables every day, the amount of processed food we're eating. So what we're aiming for is a healthy balance in our diet every day. When it comes to self-care, we do need to look at our consumption of alcohol and tobacco as well, because these sometimes are what we call short-term coping mechanisms, but really in the long term do not benefit our health. So it is important to just be aware of our consumption of alcohol and tobacco products as well. A real boost to our self-care is getting out and getting active. So any kind of movement that makes you physically active every day benefits your mental health and well-being. That could be walking outside outdoors, it could be gardening, it could be running a marathon if that's what you want to do. Something that's really important when it comes to our self-care is about how we treat ourselves, about being kind to ourselves when we make mistakes or mess up, and just understanding that we don't have to be perfect. There is a lot of evidence about the benefit of good relationships, so connecting with others and building positive relationships has a wonderful impact on our mental health and well-being. And we'll be looking at how to build positive relationships in session 4. A lot of us have given up our hobbies as we've become adults, so it's important to hold on to those interests and hobbies because they give us time out from the routine of day-to-day life. So if you've forgotten what you used to be interested in, maybe you could rediscover one of your old hobbies, because being interested and being engaged in something is hugely important. And equally, just being interested in our work and how we spend our time is important for our self-care. And stress is another thing that we do need to manage. And a lot of us experience stress in different ways and cope with it in different ways. But if stress is challenging for you, working out ways to mind it and to notice when you are getting stressed is very important to your mental health. Asking for help and being able to do that when you need it is key to self-care. Because you can't do everything alone, and sometimes it may be the support of family and friends, or sometimes it may be professional help. It may just be asking someone to give you a hand and knowing when you are becoming overwhelmed. So if help is there, do use it. If someone offers to do you a favour, accept it and be grateful. Getting good sleep is important to your self-care. Knowing how to relax, how to wind down in the evening time is key. Because doing without sleep is probably one of the most challenging things that we have to do. So it's really important to have a regular routine, getting up at the same time, going to bed at the same time. So remember in childhood when you had a bedtime routine, still equally important to have that as an adult as well, to get ready to go to sleep, which means you'll sleep better. So what gets in the way? There's probably a lot of things that you feel that do. I don't have the time. So you don't have time for self-care. And that's often when we need self-care most, when we feel we don't have the time. Or perhaps you'll do it when you get your holidays. So we're kind of kicking it down the road a bit. When you get a minute, you look after yourself. And if you're a bit of a procrastinator like me, then you never actually get round to doing that, to looking after yourself. And then the holiday comes and you're exhausted. What about I'd feel guilty taking time for myself? That's a very common one, particularly if you have children to care for. For those of you who might have been on a plane, remember the safety announcements you might have heard about the oxygen masks. To put on your own oxygen mask first before you go and tend to someone else. And the same is there for self-care. We need to look after ourselves first and not feel guilty about it, and then we're better able to look after other people. What about I can't say no, or I'm not good at saying no? And what happens then? Then you have all of these things piling up that you've said yes to, that you don't have time to do, but somehow or other you've ended up saying yes to them. So, no is an answer as well. And sometimes we need to learn and practice it. Just to say no out loud, see what it feels like. What about I'll do it when I finish this? So you have a list of tasks that have to be done first. And I think one thing we can remember about self-care is if we don't put it in our diary, if we don't plan it and prioritize it, then it won't happen, because there'll always be something to finish first. What about there's no point, I won't keep it up? So even before we started, we've decided there's no point. We won't be any good at it. There's no point in going to that class. There's no point in arranging to do something next week with a friend because you won't do it. So maybe now it's time to look at what's stopping you doing it. What's making you give up before you even start. And later on we'll have a session on understanding our thoughts, and sometimes that's important because the way we think can sometimes mean we stop something before we even start it. So lots of excuses there, maybe some genuine reasons, but have a look and see if there's any of those that you can change. How do we make time for self-care when we're so busy? One thing that's very useful, and I mentioned it earlier on, is about having a routine and a schedule and not piling up things to do all in the one day, to try and spread it out maybe over the week or over a couple of days so that you don't feel overwhelmed with having too much to do in one day. And as I mentioned earlier on about being able to say no, and one very useful tool that you can have is what I call the pause. To pause before you say yes. Because sometimes you need to say no. And if you give yourself time to think about it, then you can decide whether you do have the time or not. So you'll hear me mentioning pause a lot during this program because it's a really valuable tool to use. How are you about lists? Sometimes lists can be an added pressure, but I find a short list just with the 3 important things that you want to achieve that day can mean you get it done. Whereas if you have a big long list, it can actually put you off and you end up doing nothing because you become overwhelmed. So perhaps maybe number 1, 2 and 3 that you hope to get done that day. And at the end of the day, if you do get them done, to give yourself a pat on the back and say, well done, I did that. Because often we don't acknowledge the things that we get done, how hard we work. So praise yourself. So try not to put things off. This is procrastination again, really, isn't it? But the author Mark Twain would say, if it's your job to eat a frog, eat it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest one first. So what that really means is if there's something that you really don't want to do, to try and get it out of the way as soon as you can, so that you're not thinking about it all day. And sometimes we don't have a lot of time. So even getting into the habit of taking short breaks during the day. Put your feet up for a couple of minutes, have a cup of tea, phone a friend, or get outside for a little walk around the place. Even a stretch at your desk if you're working in an office. And that can just boost your mood and boost your energy until you have more time to take a proper break. So really we do have to try and make time for self-care. It's not always easy and it does take a bit of effort. It takes a bit of planning. But once you start to notice the benefits, you will realise it's worth it. And to remember it's not selfish and not to feel guilty, because good mental health starts with looking after yourself. Part of self-care is paying attention to ourselves, being able to tune in to our bodies, tune into how we're feeling. And one way of doing that is by using our breath. And the good thing about our breath is we always have it, so you can draw on it at any stage. So for the next minute or 2, I'm just going to take you through a very short breathing exercise that you can do anywhere, anytime. So first of all, just to get comfortable where you're sitting, you might want to maybe adjust your position, put your feet on the floor, close the door, whatever it is, just so that you can be comfortable and undisturbed for maybe a minute and a half. So just noticing first of all your body in the chair and your feet just firmly on the floor, grounding you. And bringing your attention just very slowly to your breath. Don't change it. And if you find that just by bringing your attention to your breath, that your breath has changed, just to put your hand very gently on your chest and just breathe slowly, just for a few seconds until your breath calms again. And if you want to close your eyes, it just means you're not being distracted. So for this one, we're going to bring our attention to our breath. And just noticing your breath coming in and going out. Nothing else. Just coming in and going out. Now taking a breath in through your nose and just holding it. 1, 2, 3, and slowly letting it out, very, very slowly. We do that again. We're going to inhale through our nose, just breathe in very slowly through your nose. 1, 2, 3, and hold. 1, 2, 3, and leave your breath out. 1, 2, 3, and one more time, breathing in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, and hold. 1, 2, 3. And breathing out. 1, 2, 3. Just bringing your attention to your breath, coming in and going out as normal. And just notice that you feel calmer, that your body is more relaxed, and that you can do this anytime, anywhere, when you need to take a little break. And when you feel ready, just to open your eyes slowly again, to just notice your surroundings. And bringing your attention back to me. I'm still here with you. Taking short breaks like that and learning how to tune into our body and into how we feel helps us pick up the warning signs that we're getting stressed and that we need to mind our self-care. Have you a sense of how you know when you're actually getting stressed? For some people it could be a headache, it could be aches and pains, or they could just get irritated with people. You could eat the head of somebody over some minor thing because your stress is rising and you're not aware of it. And that can be a sign that you haven't been minding yourself, that your self-care has slipped. Perhaps maybe you intended to go out for a walk every evening and you haven't done that for a while, or that you haven't managed to eat as healthily as you hoped and you're just snacking and not getting proper nutrition. So all of that can actually affect our overall well-being. And if we have good self-care, the chances of that happening are less. So as you can see, stress and self-care are connected. So in order to manage our stress and improve our self-care, we need to look at how we can build our own self-care toolkit. What is a self-care toolkit? Well, these are all the healthy practices and habits that we do for ourselves every day. I mentioned them earlier on. that benefit our overall health and well-being. There may be some in there already that you're very happy with, and there may be areas then that you want to improve on. If you're someone who doesn't take a lot of physical activity, that might be something that you want to increase during the week. It's recommended that we have 30 minutes a day of moderate physical activity. How are you doing on that? Maybe that's an area that you want to look at. What about your caffeine and sugar and alcohol consumption? Maybe there are things that you want to reduce, and that can go in as a good habit into your self-care toolkit. Looking again at sleep. How's your sleep? Are you getting a good night's rest? And that is something that can improve the quality of our life a huge amount. So it's important to have that in our toolkit if it's not there already. So you'll know yourself the areas that you need to focus on and that you'll benefit most from. So once you've decided the areas that you want to focus on, then it's about making a commitment to yourself. Because as I said earlier on, if we don't plan it, then it doesn't get done. So it is about committing to actually doing what it is you want to do for your mental health and well-being. For now, just focus in on one area that you want to add to your toolkit, one habit that perhaps you want to change. To start now and continue on. And when you've done that, to pat yourself on the back and acknowledge yourself for making that change and say, well done. Because your self-care is worth it, and so are you. So let's recap on what we covered in the session. Self-care is about taking care of ourselves by prioritizing things that maintain and improve our well-being. We can grow our self-care practices to make our own self-care toolkit to support us every day or when we need it most. And don't forget, making time for ourselves and noticing what we need is the basis for good self-care. Thank you for joining me in this session of practicing self-care. And our next session of Minding Your Wellbeing will be understanding our thoughts. I hope you can join me then. If you want more information on healthy eating and other areas of health and well-being, you can go to the Health and Wellbeing section of hse.ie for information and support on reducing your alcohol consumption. Visit askaboutalcohol.ie, and for help to quit smoking, visit quit.ie. You'll be offered support and advice, and you can learn about our current 28-day campaign. This highlights that if you can quit for 28 days, you are 5 times more likely to quit for good.